Hello and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my review on the Transformers Studio Series Voyager class Movie 1 Megatron, the final figure that we needed in order to round out our Transformers Movie 1 cast. This is Megatron based on his first appearance into the live-action Transformers movie franchise, and I've got to say is a figure that initially I wasn't necessarily too hyped for. Initial product images of this figure and then subsequently leaked images of the figure in hand really did turn me off this figure. I didn't think that he looked as cool as perhaps he possibly could be, plus my opinion was slightly tarnished due to the amazing MPM Movie 1 Megatron that Hasbro and Takara put out in the middle of 2019, but I've got to say, having this figure in hand, it is a completely different experience. Whilst I don't think that this is the best movie Megatron ever to be produced by Hasbro and Takara, I have found myself having a fantastic time in just posing this figure around in different poses, and he really does look very intimidating. Checking out the figure's head sculpt, this is an entirely brand new sculpt by Hasbro and really does capture the elongated chin that we see Megatron have in that first movie. Whilst it does keep the essence of the second movie Megatron design, we do definitely have a much more sharper, more narrower chin than that version, and I've got to say that the overall paint applications on this figure really astound me. Once again, when first in-hand images of this figure leaked, I didn't really like the overall look of the figure, but one thing that really surprised me was how well painted this character was, as I do believe this is one of the first Voyager class figures in years to have such a fantastic looking paint deco. As you can see, the entire head sculpt has been picked out in this super nice silver premium paint with some fantastic red piercing eyes in the center of the face. We can also see a slightly more darker, more gunmetal type of paint app used for the mouth section of Megatron. And then as we turn around now to the torso area, this was another reason as to why I wasn't necessarily that hyped about this figure, as this entire region here is just a reuse of the Revenge of the Fallen Megatron, and the first movie Megatron does have a different design, but I've got to say, having it in person, you really don't notice it too much, and it definitely does blend in very nicely with the rest of the sculpt, particularly being done in a completely silver paint deco. On the shoulders as well, we've got that very angular, very alien-esque type of design with different circular components within the actual shoulder. Loads and loads of fantastic details, and whilst we're on the topic of the top area of Megatron, just spinning him around, we can really see that this figure has no back kibble whatsoever. This is a first for movie Megatron figures, as the first movie leader Megatron, as well as even the MPM version, had a massive backpack. This is incredibly flush and really does sit very tightly compared to some other figures. However, the legs are less debatable. Turning around now to the actual arm sections, once again we've got some super nice silver paint for the actual paneling of the arms with some super detailed looking fingers, very alien, very creepy in their design. These are rather firm plastic, the type of plastic that I wish we saw on the leader class Shockwave. But as we turn around down to the legs, we've got some nice sculpting and detailing here, and when you turn down to the shins of the figure, this is where all of the wings are actually stored, and you can see that the legs are very clunky and very bulky, but I've got to say, having it in person, they definitely do look a lot better in hand than how they are appearing on screen, and the silver paint apps I definitely think help to detract your eyes from the glaring issues of how much kibble there is. Another thing to note on this figure is how well balanced he is. Not only does he have a really large heel spur on both of his feet, but he actually has a heel spur actually just in the middle, just where the toes are, in order for you to get this figure into some great poses which use articulation, which isn't even necessarily for transformation. So it's awesome to see Hasbro really looking after their fans in this instance and giving us a super articulated Megatron. I've got to say, I'm completely shocked with this figure from Hasbro, considering how articulated he is and how well painted he is. He almost appears to be something like a Takara figure than just a regular Hasbro release. Now, before I get into the articulation segment, if you fold Megatron's hand within, he does in fact include the mace weapon that we see him use within the first movie to break out the ice. I would have preferred it if they would have included the cannon that he uses when he claps his two hands together and forms out to blast Optimus, as this is a very rigid, very firm piece of plastic. There really isn't much flex in it whatsoever, and it does spring back into place, but it's got some nice sculpting and detailing. However, it's completely unpainted, and it does just insert within this slight gap within Megatron's arm and you just slide it in. And here we have Megatron wielding the whip that we see him use in the movie. And you can kind of get a two-arm pose to make it look as if though perhaps he has pulled it out of his hand. But it really doesn't do much considering the rigidness of the plastic. But due to the excellent articulation, you can actually get him into quite some cool poses with this. And I've actually found myself having quite a lot of fun posing this figure around with this included weapon. Just setting this off to the side now and getting into articulation. For the head of Megatron, it is on a ball joint, so it is able to look left to right as well as up and down, and it can tilt side to slide ever so slightly. I found myself having some clearance issues with this nose cone section. As you can see, when you rotate the head, it does ding into the side of Megatron's head, which is such a shame, and there really isn't no way to move this out of the way without it springing back into place, which is a slight shame, but if you do maneuver it, it can be adjusted without bumping into that. We also have a hinge joint here allowing you to tilt the head forward and backwards, so you can cock it forwards and backwards. The arms are able to rotate the full 360 degrees as well as hinge out to the sides to a reasonable degree. You don't get a great degree of motion due to the complex design of the shoulders, but there's 360 rotation just above the elbow as well as a 90-degree bend at the elbow, and the hands can also move back and forth due to transformation. There is no waist articulation, but the legs are able to kick forwards that far as well as back to about that far, which is a great degree of articulation. He can also do the splits to about that degree. There's a 360 rotation at the thigh and then an over 90-degree bend at the knee. Despite there being quite a lot of wing kibble on this leg, it really doesn't detract from the overall posability. And something which isn't integrated into transformation, which I'm so surprised to see, is a super nice ankle rocker joint, which allows you to get a super deep range of motion out of the ankles. This heel spur can move forwards and backwards, and the front toe can also move forwards and backwards, allowing you to get this figure into some super cool poses. As you can see, you can get him leaning all the way down, and he really can keep a pose quite well as well. He really is quite balanced, so that is fantastic to see on a modern day Voyager class Megatron. And for a movie Megatron size comparison, here we have the first trilogy of live action Transformers movies Megatron designs, all in their robot modes, all looking really cool. Obviously here we've got the first movie Megatron, the second movie Megatron, and then subsequently the Dark of the Moon third movie Megatron. The first movie Megatron was never really my favourite design. It was always a toss-up between the Revenge of the Fallen or Dark of the Moon design, but I've got to say, having all of these figures in hand, they all look really awesome. And even when you compare the chest to the movie 1 Megatron to the second movie, they really even look different due to how different the paint apps are and due to how the entire body is a completely new sculpt besides this torso area. We can definitely see the evolution of Megatron here. We can see that to start off with, he had a very diagonal chin design, and then as it got to the second movie, it becomes slightly more squat. And then obviously we get to the third movie, which was very similar to the second movie, only this time he had battle damage. All of these figures are in scale. These two are Voyagers, and this is supposed to be a leader class. This is a leader merely due to the more plastic and the larger looking vehicle mode. But all of these entries into the Studio Series line really do look fantastic. I still think that out of all three of them, the Revenge of the Fallen version is my preferred version. I just really like this figure quite a lot. The first movie version is really good. It's a toss up in between which is my favourite figure between this one and the Dark of the Moon one. I'm not too sure which one would come into second place, but the Revenge of the Fallen one still is my preferred figure out of all of them. Just setting the Dark of the Moon figure off to the side just so that we can bring in these two figures for a quicker, more closer comparison. You can really see here that if I squat the legs down on this ROTF one ever so slightly, they are exactly the same scale, so really good continuity on Hasbro's part, and they really do look awesome. The only thing that annoys me slightly is the fact that if they could get this much silver paint on this figure, why couldn't they silver paint deco this one, much like how the prototype was in Toy Fair of 2018? I'm really confused as to that, and I've got to be honest and say that this is one of the rare examples where I actually think there might be too much silver paint on this figure, as I really don't remember this first movie Megatron being this shiny. Perhaps Hasbro thought that as this was the first version of Megatron, he was pristine and he was ready for battle, and then as it progressed, the movies, he got more darker. But personally, this is Megatron as he was frozen in the ice, so I don't think he'd be as shiny as this. But just comparing the back kibble, I just think that the Revenge of the Fallen version as a whole tidies up a lot better. But both of these figures are very good in their own regards. And for a first movie Studio Series Decepticon size comparison and shot in general, here we have the entire main Decepticon cast, all in leader class, Voyager class and deluxe class scale, and I think that as a whole, as a collective group, these 6 all look really well done together, and I really like the added inclusion of Megatron into the mix as it just rounds off the first movie cast really nicely. And for the comparison shot that everybody wants to see, here we have both movie 1 Megatron and movie 1 Optimus Prime. These two figures look absolutely fantastic together, and I definitely think scale really nicely. It's exactly the same scale that we saw with both the Revenge of the Fallen Megatron as well as the Dark of the Moon one, so the continuity in terms of their scale really has carried over in the studio series really well, and with both movie 1 interpretations of our characters, we can in fact recreate the scenes.
Humans don't deserve to live, they deserve to choose for themselves.
So with everything covered for Megatron's robot mode, now we get into transformation. Transformation for this Megatron figure, I wouldn't necessarily say it was complex, it's more involved than anything. To begin with, we're going to want to turn to the back and just take this whole back section here and pop it out of these joints and just bring it down. Now what we can do is unfurl this whole nose cone section. It's magnificent how well the nose cone actually does fold into the torso of Megatron. Now what we can proceed to do is come to these arms, and the arms are actually hooked into place. You're just going to want to disengage this hook here and bring this down just like so, and repeat the same process now for this side. Bring this down, and then we can proceed to fold up Megatron's hands into these cavities. Now what we can do is take this whole section here, and you're going to want to collapse this grey piece all the way in just like that. You're then going to want to rotate the head around so that we can now bring these pieces in, and then we can bring these arms around and then just bring this. It's quite difficult to get the head out of the way, but it is doable. So you want this darker section to overlap this grey section, and then we'll rotate the head around again and repeat the same process now for this side. So just get it out of the way in order to allow that tab to pass. And then what we can do is take the head and recess it backwards and have it situated in that position. Now what we can do is bring these back even further, bring these grey pieces back so that these grey pieces look like this. We can then bring these down, and as you can see on either side of Megatron, he does have tabs here and here that will plug into some slots here and here. What you'll want to do here is bring this all the way down, and it will just allow for clearance. You just want to tab all this in, and all this will slot into place. The nose cone will come over Megatron's face, and what you'll want to do is just ensure that these tabs have fully aligned appropriately with Megatron's arms. So just bring these sections in, click those into place, and bring it in on this side and click this into place. And the positioning of how you move these elbow joints are really up to you. I recommend just getting them into a formation so that they look like the 3 daggered point that we see on movie Megatron's jet mode in the movie. Now what we can proceed to do is turn our attention to this entire leg region, which houses the entire wing assembly. What you're going to want to do here is collapse the heel spur down, and you're going to want to separate these two pieces. Doing that will then allow you to take this, lift this leg as far out as it will possibly go, and bring this all the way around. I choose to do it this way as there is a tab there that will actually slide into a slot, and you just want to keep that there for vehicle mode. With that now out of the way, we can grab this wing section here and proceed to pull this all out, and then we can straighten this wing assembly out. And on the undersides here, we can pull this section out. And with here, you're going to want to pull this out, pull this section down, and rotate this out. And this small nub here will actually peg into a port, which is on the underside of the side of the wing. So just align that up appropriately and snap that into place, ensuring that we've got a slight gap in between this layer and this layer. Now what we can do is proceed to do exactly the same on the opposite side. You could technically do one leg and then fold it over, but I tend to do both of them as I believe that that works best. So just bring this all down and rotate it so that it's now in this slot. Now what we can do is uncurl this wing, and it's more or less of just folding out the entire component of the wing. Bring this down, and then once again tab it into this port. So just align it and click it into place. Now with the legs, what you're going to want to do here is take this wing and actually fold it backwards like so, and bring the wing outwards. So just bring these two halves together, lift these knee joints up, bring those together. What you're going to want to do is take this, unhook that tab, and then rotate this around like so. So you should in theory, have a setup that looks somewhat like this. This is how the wings all should be displayed, and now we're actually going to tab quite a few elements into place. These small tabs here are going to plug into these slots here and here, and then these hooks here on either side are going to plug into these tabs here. So what I recommend doing is taking one leg at a time, bringing this down, and then tabbing this one into place first, and then coming to this hook section here and hooking that over the tab. And then finally there is a small slot on the heel spur that will plug into this grey tab, so just bring that down, tab that into place, and you could leave the toes up like this. However, I like to fold them down for a more flush, more coherent look, and repeat the exact same process now for this side. In theory, you could technically just collapse it down and then come to this and tab this in so that you have a basis for how all this is supposed to go. So just bring this tab over and tab that into that slot, bring this grey tab into that darker grey slot, and then finally bring this slot here into this tab. I find that this one doesn't necessarily hook in too well, but of course as it's on camera it has decided to do it absolutely perfectly. Snap that in, and then make sure that the tabs on the arms haven't come undone. So just snap all of this into place, snap this into place as well. Once again, this one is rather difficult for me to get in. Ensure that these are clipped in together properly. And with all that done, here we have the Transformers Studio Series Movie 1 Megatron fully transformed and in his alien Cybertronian jet alt mode. So definitely a rather fun transformation. I've got to say that I have actually found this figure incredibly enjoyable, which I think makes a figure more worth its value if you get more joy out of it. And I really think that in this jet mode, this is where the silver paint apps really shine. This figure is just so shiny. It's really nice to see, and is great to see rather than just a bland grey plastic. Now, this definitely resembles the Movie 1 Megatron's alien jet, and I think that they've done a great job in getting a decently looking robot mode and a really nice looking jet mode, whilst having a very satisfying transformation. I really like the longness of the wings as well as the free daggered spike. This almost reminds me of the Green Goblin's glider, with a longer looking nose cone section here with these two spikes on the sides. Loads and loads of detail as well. Really nice. I like how the feet actually do look like sculpted in detailing for this particular mode. And then as you turn onto the underside, you do have the torso area of Megatron. We do have 3 points that you can rest him on. This point here, this point, and then of course the base of the chest. But of course, if you leave it on a flat surface and lift it up, you could potentially scratch the paint. So I don't tend to leave it on any surface that is of a hard material. So overall, a really nice looking jet mode. I'm not going to go into too much detail of it, as the detail can really just be seen by giving it a glance over. There really isn't nothing that states that this is an alien jet. It really does look rather obscure in its design, but a really nice looking resemblance to what we see on screen. Now, taking Megatron's whip accessory, there is a huge port on the side where the leg is, and this plug here will actually plug into that. So you just want to port that into place, and that is how you store the whip on Megatron when in jet mode. From certain angles it does look rather disguised, but from other angles you can clearly see it sticking out, but it's a nice incorporation nevertheless. So that was my review on the Transformers Studio Series Voyager class Movie 1 Megatron, a figure that I had no hype for or no anticipation for whatsoever, but one which has definitely surprised me drastically. I'm thoroughly impressed by this figure, and it is a really enjoyable release into the Studio Series. The robot mode is really nicely done. Despite reusing the torso of the Movie 2 Megatron, I do not find it a drawback whatsoever in this release. It really does look rather different when compared to that figure due to the overall enhancement of silver paint. The head sculpt's great, the rest of the body's great. The legs may be slightly clunky, but then they did get rid of the backpack, which I do believe is slightly better, and it makes him a lot more grounded when posing him, as the weight is at the feet and not so much on the top. I think that transformation is incredibly enjoyable to go back and forth from. All you've got to be wary of is chipping the silver paint. If you are delicate and take your time with this figure, you should have no problems chipping the paint whatsoever, and we are left with a very nicely looking alien jet mode that strongly captures Megatron's appearance from the first movie. Talking of the first first movie. The first movie Decepticon cast is now completely done. They have closed the book on that, and the only figure they could really give us for this movie now would perhaps be a Bumblebee without his battle mask, and perhaps a small little Frenzy figure. I really enjoyed taking a look at this figure, much like I have done with all of the figures in this wave. With all that being said, please let me know down in the comment section below what you thought of both the figure and the review, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.